Do you think Trump has been to the island?
No.
Do you think Trump is harboring people that have?
No. I think Trump is playing a very intricate game right now with this, and he has to be very deliberate in what happens. Somebody said Bruce vote is OMB. I'm trying to remember what the heck Lutnick is. But anyways, what President Trump is doing right, and this is just my opinion. He came out and said that the
Secretary of the Commerce. My mistake.
Commerce. There you go. You're close enough. Treasury, Commerce. Same thing, right? More bureaucrats. Let's just get way more bureaucrats. Maybe we could we got Treasury, we got Commerce. Maybe we could have the Treasury of or the Secretary of the Coinage. I don't know. So what I think President Trump is doing right here is I think that these files that are in there, these have been in the government's hands for years and years and years. They've been at the Southern District of New York. Maureen Comey has, after prosecuting the case, has been there. I do believe Trump when he says that these files have been corrupted, that there's potentially stuff that's not true in these files. The thing that I think is really key to all of this is going to be those grand jury transcripts in the Southern District, and I would love to see them in Florida. Obviously, they've ruled on that one and said that they're not going to turn those over. I think Trump is going to appeal. Or the DOJ will appeal. I've read the Rosenberg case that was cited in there about the Rule 6E exemptions for grand juries, because grand juries are very, very secretive, and rightfully so. They should be very, very secretive. However, outside of some of the rules outlined in Rule 6E in the federal code, there's also some exemptions that were granted by the Second Circuit Court in the Rosenberg case. Now, the Rosenbergs were two people that were selling nuclear secrets to the Soviets back in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s. And they ultimately were hung for treason. And it turns out after you got the grand jury transcripts that one of the people that they hung was innocent. And this is something that I don't know the details of what came out. I just read the case itself. I think what President Trump is doing right now is he's trying to make the case that there is a public interest, a historical public interest in these grand jury transcripts coming out. The defendant is dead, allegedly. Epstein's dead. Whether it was suicide, whether he was murdered, or whether he's in WITSEC, whatever the case may be.
Luke is convinced that he's hiding out somewhere.
I think he's hiding out. I don't think he's dead.
For all we know, he's on his own island.
Yeah, the pictures that Luke is putting up are I've seen that picture, the overhead shot, looks very much like him on the island. Who else would it be? So what I think President Trump is doing right now is he baited people into, and no offense to you guys, he baited Democrats, the left, into joining the hysteria and the outcry to release these transcripts so that when they take this, they can say, look, there is a public interest in releasing these. Redact the names. We don't need the co-conspirators. I just want to see the evidence that was presented to this grand jury and be able to cross-examine or cross-reference that evidence with what was presented to Pam Bondi when she took her seat as the Attorney General. Will anything come of that? Maybe, maybe not. President Trump historically was the only witness that worked with plaintiffs in the lawsuits that were being levied against Jeffrey Epstein. There's the famous press conference that was done outside of the courthouse. I think it was in the Gouffre trial, but where, the guy said the only person that agreed to work with us was Donald Trump when I reached out to him. And this was back around 2017 or 2018. There's a lot of shenanigans in this. And I think it's going to get dark for President Trump before it gets bright. But I think when we have that public interest that's on both sides, bipartisan interest in unsealing these transcripts, I think that's going to be the best shot to get those unsealed. And I don't care who's in them, by the way. Like if Trump's in them and there's damning information about President Trump in there, I don't care. I want it all out.
I think most people feel that way. Colin, could you scroll down, please? Ghislaine Maxwell is asking for a pardon, obviously. That text is very small. But the former girlfriend and convicted accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to hear her appeal of her 2021 sex trafficking conviction. And on Monday, today, Maxwell's legal team submitted a filing asking for the Supreme Court to hear her appeal. in the brief, Maxwell's attorneys argue the federal government has an obligation to honor a 2007 non-prosecution agreement made by Epstein that they say should also shield Maxwell from criminal charges. Now, God, they're so fucking vile. They really are. Even more remarkably, the government advances an interpretation of its non-prosecution agreement that flips its plain meaning on its head. Promising not to prosecute somehow meant preserving the right to prosecute. Again, this is all legal eagle shit, Jen, if you're following along. This is not contract interpretation, it's alchemy. So based on that load of nonsense, as far as I can see, you're now playing with real fire here if you allow Maxwell to walk out of federal prison.
But how can she be serving time for trafficking girls to nobody?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
So we're supposed to believe that just her and Jeffrey Epstein, the two of them, all themselves, just trafficked all these girls. And there are real victims. We know there's victims. We know there's victims. And they did it just for the two of themselves. And there's nobody else involved in this. So why the hell should she be in prison for trafficking girls when there's no one that got trafficked girls to them? You can't have it both ways.
Well, and again, that's why I want the grand jury transcripts. You can redact the victims, you can redact the co-conspirators, you can redact any names you want, but I want to see what actually happened, whether or not there were other people that were involved in these. And I think there were. You know, I saw some people in the chat saying release the Epstein files as opposed to the grand jury transcripts. I believe the Epstein files are corrupted. It's been a decade. If we are to believe that Israel, the Mossad, MI6, the CIA, all of these intelligence apparatuses had their hands on Jeffrey Epstein, then you're absurd to think that these files have just been sitting safely on a server somewhere and nothing has been, manipulated in any form or fashion. The grand jury transcripts, those have been under seal. That's what I want to see. I want to see what was presented to be able to get an intelligence asset convicted that had a non-prosecution agreement, and you were able to somehow still get this Epstein himself and then Maxwell released on that, indicted on this and convicted for Maxwell. Epstein, it led to his demise, his death, or his witness protection. The DOJ memo, I think, was the thing that kicked all this off. And, I've said this on my show several times. There's three things that they said in there. They said the systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. Well, that's true. A client list is not in and of itself incriminating. Anybody that thinks that Jeffrey Epstein kept a list.
Exactly. It's not exactly. It's not like one list that says clients on the top of it. Of course.
And Bill Clinton did this, and this.
Right. No,
Donald Trump did this. So that is true. I think that's a true statement. The next thing they said is there's no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. I don't think Epstein blackmailed anybody. I think whoever was handling Epstein, whoever was storing that information, is who was doing the blackmail. I don't think.
Who's that? Who do we think that is?
Well, I think it was the Mossad. I think they definitely were involved in this. I think the CIA. These handlers, these assets can go from one agency to the next, like just blow with the wind.
They could be both. They share assets. You're talking about these. They work together. It's the Mossad, it's MI6, and it's CIA, and they all share little assets.
Whatever they are hiding, whatever it is. And for those of you who want to know definitively who's been on that island, the worst billionaire of them all, Bill Gates, has been on that island. It is pretty much well known at this point. So much so that that's what his wife essentially says is the reason that they got divorced. I'm sure there's more to it than just that. And never forget that clip when Bill Gates was questioned about Epstein, and he very grinningly said, yeah, well, you're not going to be hearing from him no more. This is why when we say that this is even above Trump's pay grade, it is, because there are people that probably have told Trump, you let this out, you're a dead man. It's that simple. And so this is Dan Bongino, who I'm sure you've read this from earlier today, but this is what he had to say. During my tenure here as the deputy director of the FBI, I have repeatedly relayed to you that things are happening that might not be immediately visible, but they are happening. The director and I are committed to stomping out public corruption and the political weaponization of both law enforcement and intelligence operations. It is a priority for us. But what I have learned in the course of our properly predicated and necessary investigations into these aforementioned matters has shocked me down to my core. We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same after learning what I've learned. We are going to conduct these righteous and proper investigations by the book and in accordance with the law. We are going to get the answers we all deserve. As with any investigation, I cannot predict where it will land, but I can promise you an honest and dignified effort at truth. Not my truth or your truth, but the truth. God bless America. Okay. He, of course, doesn't want to say what he's referencing, but I think we all know what he's talking about. He clearly knows stuff that he's had to keep his mouth shut about. What that is, I can't say. People can only surmise what it is. But, you know, Jen and I have been talking about a lot how the country is going through a transition of sorts. Like, this is the dawning of a new era in a lot of ways, where you're not going to put the cat back in the bag. Like, Israel is eventually, two things are going to happen. One, the Israel lobby is no longer going to control our government. And number two, the state of Israel may actually dissolve because of what they've done with this genocide, but also exposing how much systemic control they have over our daily lives domestically and on foreign policy. And that's got to change. They're not going to sweep that under the rug. They are not just going to put everybody back to bed and just think that things are going to go on as usual. Like, that's dead. And I also believe that the complete systemic control, the corruption, if you will, much as we saw earlier with what happened at Blackstone, there is systemic change that's going to happen. It has to happen. If it doesn't happen, our republic is going to cease to exist. You have federal legislators trading on inside information every single day. Why should people pay their taxes?
You know, it's funny.
Like, why should? Well, I know I'm speaking to a libertarian. Of course, you want.
Yeah, why? Tell us why, Brian.
My boss over at Badlands has a few congressmen on, you know, on his daily show that he does at 1 p.m. And he often every single one that comes on, he asks them, why should we pay taxes? Why are the people paying taxes when, you know, we see the waste, fraud, and abuse that was exposed under Doge? You know, we see USAID getting $46 billion a year and sending all of it over there to manipulate color revolutions and orchestrate, you know, coups in other countries. Why are we paying for all this? Why are we paying for Social Security when you've got 450 million names on that list? By the way, ties directly into our voter rolls. All right. Social Security database is what's used to back up our cross-reference our voter rolls when registrations are going through. You guys know elections are my big thing, which I don't think we have free and fair elections in this country.
No. Oh, God, no.
We do.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, well, I'm glad Democrats are finally starting to wake up to this.
Okay. You have to stop calling us Democrats.
The left.
Yeah. I mean, I am officially not a Democrat, but they are not the left. Democrats are not leftists. Democrats are corporatists, and they are at best centrists. We don't actually have a functioning left in this country, not with any real power. We just don't. We don't have a labor party. We don't have a working class party. We don't have that in this country. So there is no left. There's corporatism and ownership and socialism for wealthy corporations and subsidies and all sorts of stuff that screw over the small people and small businesses. So, you know, I am not a Democrat, and I do not think we have a democracy or any semblance of it anymore. I think we are an oligarchy. And the fascism is getting more and more in our faces as far as, like, you know, cracking down on our free speech and the different kinds of policing that we're seeing. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.